name is Rose Lauteris. I'm going to be a freshman at American University this fall, and I interned for this Claire Booth Lewis Center for Conservative Women last semester. Our next speaker, Liz Wheeler, profiled by Politico magazine as a titan of conservative media, is known for her show Tipping Point with Liz Wheeler on One America News Network. Her Final Point videos that air at the end of her show receive millions of views on Facebook. Liz attended Penn State University with a bachelor's degree in political science and a minor in homeland security after graduating high school at 16. In college, she served as the commissioner on the Board of Zoning Appeals in her hometown in Ohio and was the youngest person in her city's history to hold that position. Liz also organized a group of 14 young conservatives to self-publish a handbook called Young Conservative and Why It's Smart to Be Like Us, which reached number 2 on Amazon's Kindle bestseller list in the civics category. She has been named a top 10 30 under 30 conservative rising star by Red Alert Politics in 2016 and has also spoken at many conservative conferences and conventions such as CPAC, the Steamboat Institute Freedom Conference, and many more. Please welcome Liz Wheeler.
Thank you. Hi, ladies. My name is Liz Wheeler, and I appreciate the introduction. I want to give a big thank you to the Center for Conservative Women for having me and for hosting all of you all for this conference. I hope you appreciate how amazing it is to be able to be in the same room with other like-minded women. I think we've all experienced a time where we feel very isolated or very alone in our morals and values. So look around you and take a minute to appreciate what an incredible opportunity this is to be here today. So my name is Liz Wheeler. I host the show Tipping Point on One America News Network. We are a 1-hour news show that challenges all the liberal talking points and rhetoric day after day, and they certainly supply us with a lot of it. So what I want to do tonight is I want to talk to you about the history of whaling in Nantucket and how that has impacted our economy over the past 400 years. Oh no, wait, that is what my husband made me listen to on the 5-hour drive up here. That is not what we will be talking about tonight. I took a nap, and for good reason. Okay, what I actually want to do tonight should be a little bit more fun. So you have learned a lot of information at this conference so far, right? A lot of good stuff, and I assume you come in knowing your stuff to begin with, so you probably feel extra equipped with all these different talking points, all these different new angles, all these different tactics for how to defeat the left, correct? Yes. So what I want to do tonight is I want to teach you how to take that information and essentially weaponize it, to use to defeat the left, because I think a lot of times, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of times we as conservatives will feel like we know the answer. We know what's right. We know our stuff. But when we get into a conversation with liberals, sometimes we feel stumped. We feel, oh, how do I answer that? I know I'm right. I know I'm morally right. I know I'm factually right. I know I read that in a book somewhere, but we don't remember how to articulate it, right? So that's what we're going to do tonight. I'm going to show you how to do it so that the next time you're on campus or you're talking to your boyfriend's father or you're talking to anybody who is of a different political view, you will know how to very politely, very calmly, completely defeat them. So we're going to do this on many different topics. Do you guys have pen and paper to take notes? Okay, so I'm not going to require you to take notes on my entire speech, but there are a couple things I want you to write down as we go along tonight, which you'll understand towards the end of my speech. So we're going to talk about multiple topics, but the example that I want to give to explain to you how to do this, to start, will be socialism. This is the topic of the day from the Democrats. They tell us it's wonderful. We know it's horrible. But it's kind of shocking, isn't it, if you look at polls, how many people in our generation, people that we go to school with, maybe our friends, actually buy into that. And sometimes it's hard to know how to defeat that without, again, getting very intellectual or talking about moments in history that are obscure to us because we didn't live through them. They don't feel personal to us. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to teach you a strategy for how to identify the left's agenda behind their policies and then how to destroy it. So what I mean by this is you and I know that the left's goal is to create a bigger government, right? To put government in charge, to take rights away from us, and to have government bureaucrats dictating to us what they think is moral, what they think is right, what we should do and say, and how we should act, and what we should believe, and how that applies to the workplace. They want to make the decisions, and they don't want us to make any decisions. And that's fundamentally wrong to begin with from a moral standpoint, but I think I speak for a lot of the ladies in this room when I say I don't want anybody telling me what to do. I want to decide that for myself. So we're going to start tonight with a strategy that I call unpack, define, and debate. And what I mean by these three things, unpack, define, and debate, is first you have to identify what the left's ulterior motives are. And for this, I'm going to use the example of the Green New Deal. So the Green New Deal, right. So the Green New Deal, they tell us is about climate change, right? But we know it's not about climate change. If we look, you don't have to look very deeply. It's a 6-page document. If you look at this 6-page document on any congressional website, AOC's congressional website, or the web archive feature where the truth is, after she pulled it down, you can see that the policies in the Green New Deal are not particularly pertinent to our environment. Universal basic income, how does that have to do with trash? How does that have to do with recycling? Getting rid of cows. These things are not, getting rid of billionaires, these things are not pertinent to our environment. So we have to identify what the ulterior motive is. So essentially with the Green New Deal, we have the Democrats using this as a medium to usher socialism into our nation, right? They're telling us that we have to address climate change, and that's their sales pitch, essentially, but really they're using it to get socialism into our nation. So that's sort of what I mean by unpack. Then once you unpack it, and I'm going to show you how to unpack it in just a second, but I want to outline this first. After you unpack it and you figure out the left's ulterior motives, then you want to define what it is. And what I mean by define, I mean that very literally. When we're talking about socialism, we can't just say, oh, socialism, it's killed tons of people. We have to define exactly what it means, because there's a shocking number of our peers who don't know what the technical economic definition of socialism is, what it means to our community, what it means to our laws, and what it means to our economy. So we have to define what it is that we are trying to defeat after we've identified it. So we unpack it, we define it, and then we debate it once we have set the stage for how we want to debate. Okay, so going back to the Green New Deal, I'm going to show you first how to unpack it, and then we'll get to define it, then we'll get to debate it. So if we take the Green New Deal, we have to ask ourselves, how did we get to a point in our nation where we have not just some obscure freshman congresswoman, but every single 2020 Democratic presidential candidate who has signed on to a piece of legislation so vague that we don't really know what it will do, but the parts that we do know about it tell us that we wouldn't be able to fly an airplane to Hawaii. We would have to take a train. How did we get to this point? Because it's so absurd. It's so eminently ridiculous. We have to say, how did the Democrats trick so many people to get to this point? Well, we look at what they do. We go back 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and we look for their strategy. We look for their strategy. What did they start doing? Probably before you and I were even born. What did they start doing in the 1970s? They started talking about climate change. And they didn't talk about it scientifically. They talked about it emotionally. They told us that this was something that was going to destroy our lives as we know it. They told us the polar bears were going to die. They told us the ice caps were melting. They started using language and rhetoric that stokes fear. So we feel this fear, especially as young women. We feel preemptive protection for our families, our children, our future children, our grandchildren. We want them to be able to grow up, in a yard with grass and go sledding in the winter like we did when we were children. We don't want them to live in some destroyed version of our earth where snow has melted and deserts have burned out and the climate is completely ruined. So they plant the seed of fear. And then they create urgency. They say, if we don't do something soon, we're going to get past the point of no return. So that plants in our mind not only the seed of fear, but that impetus that we need to take action. And they do this, and they repeat this over and over. I used to work for, before I worked for One America News, I worked for a veteran advocacy organization, and I worked in their messaging and their marketing department. And we always operated by this rule of marketing that people had to hear something 7 times before they would buy it. You know, whether it's a product, I mean, it doesn't take me that long to see an ad on Instagram and buy it, but maybe a little bit less for the social media generation, but people have to hear it a certain number of times before they'll buy into it. But once they've heard it, no matter how ridiculous it is, a certain amount of times, they put a level of credibility to it, whether or not that credibility is deserved. It becomes normalized to them. So that's what the left did. They planted that seed of fear. They created that urgency, that impetus of, oh, what do we do? How do we save this? And then they repeated it until it became normalized to us. And then they told us, well, the free market, the private sector, they've had their opportunity to fix this. We've already given them their chance. They failed. They couldn't do it. So the only people that can solve this problem, they tell us, is us, government bureaucrats. So what have they done? Fear, urgency. They've said the private sector can't fix this. We can fix this. We're the only ones that can fix this. And then they bring it to a head. They tell us, well, this isn't something that's going to happen in the, indefinite future. This is something that if we don't do in 12 years, you guys have heard that line, right? 12 years, 2030, and we're all dead. They cite the United Nations, very, very nonpartisan group. Those people, you can really count on them for science. They cite the United Nations and say 12 years, and we're dead if we don't do something radical. They use the word radical. And then, once they've prepped us, once they've planted the fear and stoked the urgency, once they've told us the private sector can't fix it, and that government's the only way that we can solve this problem, or we're going to die in 12 years, then, only then, did they give us the Green New Deal. And so what do people feel when they see this? Do they look inside of it and do they think about it critically? Or do they think, finally, we're going to be saved from this, our lives are going to be put back to normal, and we're going to be the generation that solved this moral crisis? And people don't look at it. That is how you unpack the Democrats' ulterior motive. You look at what they did, whether it's short game or whether it's long game, and you unpack it to look at what they're actually trying to do. The Democrats know that if they try to sell socialism directly to us, if they say, hi, I'm John Smith, and I'm running for president of the United States, and I'm a socialist, a lot of people are going to be like, buzz off. So what do? They tell us it's about climate. Meanwhile, you unpack it, you unpeel the layers of that onion, and what do you find in there? Just straight up socialism. You find government-run healthcare at a universal basic income, guaranteed jobs, free college, redistribution of wealth to the point that it's immoral and egregious to have billionaires that even exist in our nation anymore. It is just socialism. So once you've unpacked it, you can do this with any topic, any political topic. And this is the point. I want you to write down 2 of the political topics in our current discourse that you believe are either the most critical or your pet topics, your favorite topics. Write them down because we're going to come back to them. So you unpack it to find out what their ulterior motive is. And once you know socialism is their ulterior motive, you define it. What is socialism? This is not a rhetorical question. Anyone can throw it out. What is socialism? The definition of socialism. That's right. It's government being in charge of the means of production and distribution in an economy. So Democrats, of course, are going to say, well, that's not what we want. We just want everyone owning, collectivism, everyone owning it. Well, it's the same thing, isn't it? If government taxes all your profits away, it's the same redistribution as if government owns the means of production and distribution. Just a little tiny bit different of a definition, but the ends are the same. Once you define it, no one wants it because no one wants to give up their labor to the government, have the government give the fruits of their labor, which is part of who we are, to somebody else who didn't earn that. So you unpack it, you define it, and then you debate it. And now we get to the fun part. This is the part where I want you to picture, you don't have to picture a specific person in your life, but I want you to picture being in a conversation at a coffee shop, on your college campus, one-on-one with a liberal. If a liberal asks you, what's wrong with democratic socialism? Why shouldn't we have that here? Isn't that fair? What do you say? And you can raise your hands here. What do you say in response to that? Who wants to answer that?
With a lot of my friends, I apply it to their life, and I'll take something prosperous that they've done and then show them how socialism would take half or more of that away, and then they go, oh my God, wait.
Good. Okay, so when you address your friends, do you address them? And maybe we'll do almost like role playing. If I'm your liberal friend and I say, what's wrong with socialism? Why wouldn't we have that here? I mean, it is. We do want to help. We do want to help people who are worse off. And a billionaire doesn't need all of that money. Doesn't need the yacht. Doesn't need the private jet. I mean, what's wrong with that? How do you respond? So do you respond by bringing up all your talking points for socialism? Because I think we all have sort of and I know this is an outdated reference, but sort of a card catalog in our heads, right, of talking points for every topic, the things that we know to be true on our side and the things that we know to be false from the Democrats. How do you respond to that? Pretend that I'm a leftist. What's wrong with socialism?
Well, I would know, I do it more personally with friends that I know really well, so
Okay.
I'm going to make up things about you. That might be true. But, when you started your own business and you made $100,000 last year, but if I only made $50,000, now I get $25,000 of yours so that we can be equal. And just things like that, I bring it personal to them so that they can see what they would lose.
Okay, that's a really good topic, first of all. So you're a terrible example for the first question because usually we have to teach the tactics. So no, it's a really good thing to do to be able to do personally. I will say, if you don't know the person personally, it makes it more difficult. So I would say that's exactly right, to make it personal and bring it home. I think that's why a lot of people in our generation, why socialism seems okay to them, because they don't feel it in their personal life. If there's a way to make them feel it in their personal life, hopefully, hypothetically, then that works personally. But if the person is not, if you don't know them intimately enough to know the situations in their life that socialism would hurt, the best way to go about this, and this is what I do, by the way, on my show every night. We debate a Democrat at the end, the last segment of the hour-long show every night, is to ask them questions. And so this is how you take the information that you know, the information in your card catalog of why socialism is bad, and this is how you learn how to phrase it to come back to them. So one of the examples that I mean is, and by the way, I'm talking about very calm questions, very rational questions. I'm not talking about escalating the debate. We're not talking about, the news clips that are very fun to watch, the 2-minute videos on Facebook, which I'm guilty of sometimes. I'm talking about in a realistic way to change hearts and minds. You say, well, where in the world has socialism ever worked? And then you're quiet. And this is a problem that I have, being quiet. Because my first inclination, and you probably can relate to this, my first inclination is to drop my information bomb. To say, listen, I have 2 books worth of information about why you're wrong and why I'm right. Let me just give it to you all so that you can tell how wrong you are. That's not a tactic you want to use. It's not going to work. What you want to do is you want to ask a simple question. Where in the world has socialism ever worked? And they're going to point to Scandinavia, and you can point out why Scandinavia isn't really socialist. Or you can go to another question, and you can say, well, you want democratic socialism. What's the difference between democratic socialism and regular old socialism? And you be quiet, and you listen for them to answer that question. Because that does 2 things. It not only exposes exactly what they're talking about, it lets you set the stage. It lets you direct how the conversation is going to go. You're playing on your home field, to use a sports reference. It puts the conversation in your power if you ask those tiny, calm questions to direct the conversation, because there's no way that they can pivot. There's no way they can get away from it. And those answers expose either the fallacy of their position or the truth in your own. Okay? So who has a topic that they wrote down before when I asked? Not socialism. Any other topic? You do? Yes. What's your name? Daniela.
So I wrote down, as well as these 2 lovely ladies here, U.S.-Israel relations.
Okay. So what's the most common liberal talking point that you hear from the left when it comes to that?
That Israel is a bully in the Middle East.
Right. So they murder innocent children, right? They just bomb with no abandon. They're just terrible, terrible people who are, have no reason to be attacking the poor Palestinians in the way that they are. They're just aggressive people. How do you respond to that?
Well, usually I emphasize the fact that the Israel military is called the Israel Defense Forces for a reason, that most of their attacks are planned especially to protect Palestinian citizens, and they drop letters, they send messages to evacuate the area of civilians, they target military centers and terrorist centers in order to protect innocent lives and target military centers of violence.
Right. So how do you think a leftist is going to respond to that? Right. So you don't want them to walk away, right?
Yeah, no, I'd rather engage in a civil discourse, but since they don't really handle that well.
So the way to get around that, because that's a very common reaction. It's also just a human nature reaction, something that I think is important to remember when you're talking to leftists. If you are aggressive and you try to information bomb, put yourself in their position. You'd probably want to shut down and walk away too, because it's kind of overwhelming. So the thing to do is ask a calm, quiet question. Say, which side uses children as human shields? Say, which side warns innocent people to move out of the way, planning their attacks in advance? Each piece of information that you said is 100% correct, but when you drop it in an information bomb, it's overwhelming and it makes the other person shut down. If you ask a short, calm question, it's going to draw them out. Okay? So every time, and it goes against your inclination. I've actually on the show today. So we filmed my show before early today in advance because we were going to drive up here, and I sort of lost my cool with the Democrat that was on the show this morning. He was being ridiculous about the Mueller report. Ridiculous. He was saying that Attorney General Barr is staging some sort of cover-up, and there's no reason to delay this, and we should see it unredacted. And instead of responding the way that I should have said, well, is there a federal law that prohibits the release of grand jury proceedings? And he would have had to say, well, yes, there is, and that's why it needs to be redacted. I went off on him because he was being very annoying. It was not my best debate moment, but I could have trapped him if I'd done it better. If I'd exercised some self-control in that debate, I could have actually led him to exactly where I wanted him to go. I wanted him to admit that Attorney General Barr is currently following the law, redacting classified information and information pertinent to grand jury proceedings or ongoing investigations, and that there's no reason to suspect a cover-up unless you're just so psychotically leftist that you can't accept the truth. And I could have led him to that if I'd done it right, but I didn't. And so now I'm teaching you how to do it right. All right, does anyone have another topic? Yes? Social equity in our schools. Do you support school choice?
Yeah.
Yeah, you do. Conservatives do, because that's the way to get social equity in our schools. So what's the liberal argument here against school choice? What would a liberal, if you were engaging with a liberal, what would the liberal say to you when you say, I support school choice?
Well, that's a privilege because, school choice, you have to have the money to pay for that.
So how would you respond if a liberal said that to you? If they said, well, that really does, that really is, a scheme for richer people that really doesn't help us out. How would you respond to that?
I don't know. Let me think. I don't know.
A calm question. You would say, who takes advantage in the highest percentage of voucher programs? What socioeconomic class of people? Low-income people do. Mm-hmm. You would ask a calm, rational question. You would say, well, in Florida, this past midterm election, Democratic voters, African-American women were actually the ones, if you analyze that race, they were actually the ones who elected Republican Governor Ron DeSantis because he was a proponent of school choice. They voted for the Democrat for Senate, and they voted for the Republican for governor because DeSantis' opponent, Andrew Gillum, said, that school choice was terrible and he was going to decimate that program. And Ron DeSantis said, no, I think we should do that. That's great for our kids. So you can use a calm question. Don't drop that information bomb on them right then, but you can say, well, what about the 100,000 African-American women in Florida who thought it would be better for their children to have a school choice program? Are you saying that you know better than they do about their children's education? And what are they going to say? It's going to put it in a different perspective, and it's going to bring the conversation back to where you want it to be, rather than just some vague, social equity that they haven't even defined. So always remember, phrase it as a question, and phrase it as it's a leading question. It's actually the type of question that, lawyers aren't supposed to ask the jury. You lead them to the answer that you want them to give, because there's only one right answer there. And if they answer in the way that you've led them to answer, then they can't really take their own position without contradicting themselves. And that's really, it's a trick, but it's a rhetorical trick to combat the rhetoric, the talking points that the left uses to mask their real agenda. And if we as conservatives master this, in a way that empowers us to be able to do this ourselves in our regular lives instead of waiting for someone, a talking head on TV, or waiting for that congressman to finally grow a spine. If we take it into our own hands and equip ourselves to do this, learn how to do this tactic and feel comfortable doing it, then we are going to be able to help change the narrative across our entire country. We are going to be able to spread conservatism outside of the bubble of people that we already know who already share our values, and we're going to be able to reach out to the other side and convert them. And that's what we're here for, right? Right. All right, we'll do one more of these. Does anyone else have a topic idea? Sure. What's your name? Janie.
Agriculture, so cows and other livestock are actually in our environment.
Okay, so I'm going to play the leftist here. Ready?
Okay.
Cow emissions. We have to stop people from eating meat. It's not only a humane issue, but that CO2 emissions, it's the fault of those bovines that our children are never going to know a polar bear. How do you respond?
Do you know how many people in America an average farmer feeds?
Yes, perfect. A question, a simple, calm question. So how's the leftist going to respond to that? Right. Well, if they know, then doesn't that make them a terrible person for taking that position? If they don't know, then you very calmly and respectfully educate them. I think this is another point that I want to make. So sometimes for entertainment, it's very entertaining to trap a leftist, right? To see them, it is. To see them have the proverbial brain smoke down or splutter or try to pivot. But truly, what is one of the hardest things as not just young women, what is one of the hardest things as human beings for us to do? To admit that we're wrong. Because we're afraid of losing face. It's embarrassing. It's hard to be able to change your mind on a position when things are so polarized. So even though it's entertaining to destroy the left in that way, and even though it's satisfying and you probably get a dopamine rush from it, if you actually want to change hearts and minds, what do you have to do? You have to create a loving environment that allows someone to see the light. And that's why you have to stay calm. That's why you have to ask those questions. Because even if the person doesn't change their mind right then, and they won't, that's not how human nature works. You've planted that seed. You've empowered them with that information that they can think over later. Maybe they'll Google it. Maybe they'll hear it the next time a politician actually uses it instead of letting it go in one ear and out the other. You will have given them the opportunity to start their conversion, and that counts for something. And I said that was the last one, but I want to do one more. Does anyone over here? Well, someone over here raised their hand before. I think it was you.
So gay marriage, so like supporting, like if a liberal's talking to you or someone supports gay marriage.
Why do you hate gay people? How do you respond to that? That's what the left is going to say to you.
Do you think that there's a biological difference between males and females?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know that one's pertinent to gay marriage. That one's more pertinent to the transgender issue, I think. But that's exactly the kind of question that you want to ask. It's kind of the closed-ended question. Do you think there's a difference between men and women? I mean, please, yes, or you're anti-science. But gay marriage, I don't think that's pertinent to gay marriage, though. So
Because you asked me you said why do you hate gay people?
yeah, like that's what the left is going to say to you if you say, "Oh, I support traditional marriage," whether it's informed by my religious beliefs or whether it's informed by my religious beliefs or tradition throughout the world, whatever it is, they're immediately going to say, "Well, you're discriminating against gay people. Why don't you want them to be happy?" By the way, this is a great topic, and I can tell it makes people uncomfortable. And conservatives should not cede ground to the left on social issues. They're uncomfortable topics, but they're really, really important foundational topics that we need to be able to have a conversation about without the left successfully labeling us as a bigot. I'm talking about the transgender issue. I'm talking about gay marriage. I'm talking about abortion. I'm talking about just sexual morality in general. We should not cede ground to the left. We should be able to have these conversations and not brush them aside.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because this is a big thing for me. Like, I want to know how to refute it. But I guess, do you want me to ask another question?
No. I mean, I want if you don't know how to answer that, I want to teach you all how to do this, because there are two really, really effective ways. Now, the left is still going to call you a bigot, and if you're not, I assume we're not. If you're not, then you have to just let that roll off your back. But it's not about gay people, is it? Gay marriage. It's not about your feelings, even your religious views on homosexuality at all. It's about an institution that government is redefining. And we can't let government step in and redefine things and force churches, force religious people to let the government dictate how we practice our religion, right? We have a constitutional protection against that very thing. In regards to discrimination, it's not discriminating against gay people. A gay man is just as free to go out and marry a straight woman as a straight man is. And a straight man is just as prohibited, if gay marriage were illegal, to marry another man as a gay man is. It's not about sexual orientation. It's not about the people. It's about government telling us what we have to believe and what we have to celebrate. And so you have to separate those two things. The left has been extremely successful. This is maybe the most successful the left has ever been in defining a narrative where they have conflated the two things, opposition to gay marriage with dislike, bigotry, or homophobia against gay people. Opposition to gay marriage doesn't, and I think, I hope I speak for the majority of people here when I say opposition to gay marriage or support for traditional marriage is absolutely unrelated to our feelings about gay people. Absolutely nothing to do with it. You know, even religious beliefs, and I know I don't have time to go into that, although I could speak for an hour on that. Even religious beliefs do not teach that there is anything less about gay people, that there's any reason why gay people should be treated as less. Christian beliefs, I'm Catholic, a practicing Catholic. The Catholic Church has been I saw that face. The Catholic Church has been the stalwart standing against gay marriage more than any other institution in the history of the world, and they call us to treat every single person, no matter their gender, no matter their sexual orientation, no matter their identity, with dignity and respect and as a child of God. And it's actually partially our fault as conservatives and as Christians, as many of you are Christians, correct? Mm-hmm. As Christians, for how we have misinterpreted church teachings, and we have participated in the oppression of gay people to our detriment over the last 200 years. Part of the reason we are having this pendulum swing on this social issue of gay marriage and the transgender issue is because of how we have failed in treating gay people the way that God calls us as Christians to treat gay people, even as we oppose gay marriage and support traditional marriage. And so those different types of things, like I said, we cannot be afraid to talk about this, and we have to identify immediately the difference between opposition to gay marriage and opposition to gay people. And if you pull that apart and you explain it to them, and I've done this personally before, not just on my show, I've done this with friends who are either very pro-gay marriage or are gay themselves, and explained to them that there's a huge difference between the two, and the left has twisted them together. But you talk to most conservatives, I would say the vast majority of conservatives, and it's not the same thing to conservatives. And so I know that that's not the short question, but it starts with the short question.
Is there a question that you can say in response?
Yes, the question you say in response is, do you think opposition to gay marriage means that conservatives hate gay people? And if they say yes, then say, well, let me tell you the truth. And you can give examples, too, of how conservatives and how a lot of Christians now are socially sticking up for gay people. It's conservatives in this country who are speaking out the loudest about the persecution of gay people in Iran or in Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. It's conservatives. It's not the left. It's conservatives who are talking about the exploitation of transgender youth, while the left are the ones who are exploiting those children. So if you actually unpeel that onion again and you look at it, opposition to gay marriage is not at all tied to either policy, personal position, or religious beliefs about homosexuality in general. And we have to put an axe right in between that, and we have to make sure that we do not allow the left to conflate that.
Thank you.
Of course. Sorry, I told you that would go off on a tangent to me. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so just to round back to the beginning of this, when we see the left, whether they're on TV, whether this is people in Congress, when we hear their talking points and we want to be able to defeat them ourselves and not leave it to someone else, what do? First, we unpack. We figure out what their ulterior motive is, what their underlying agenda is, and we identify that. And then we identify what the medium that they're using. Again, going back to the Green New Deal. Socialism is their agenda. The Green New Deal is the carriage that they're using to try to advance that agenda. Once we have unpacked that, then we define it. We make sure that the debate that we're having is the debate of the real issue and not some periphery pivotal, tangential point that the left wants to make to try to stay away from the heart of the matter. So we define it. What is socialism? Or, if we're talking about abortion, the heartbeat bill in Georgia, or Governor Northam in Virginia talking about infanticide, you don't talk about the peripheral issues. You go back to the heart of the matter. When does life begin? If life begins at conception, as science says it does, keeping religion out of it, then what right do we have to end that life? We do not let them distract us with all of their peripheral issues. We go right to the heart of the matter. You define what the debate that you want to have is. And then you get to debate them. And you start that debate with what? A question. A calm question that defines the court on which you will be playing this debate. It leads them to exactly the answer that you want them to give, which will either trap them or cause them to contradict themselves, or it will plant the seed and they will think about it later. And if we do this, as I'm just going to repeat what I said before, if we do this, we will win the culture wars. We will start to turn the tide on those culture wars, and we will be the ones leading that charge. We are the next generation of conservative women. We are going to be the ones who are speaking out, not just on economic topics, but on social issues. Women are typically the ones who lead that charge. Women were the ones who ushered in abortion, and we women should be the ones to usher that out. And so my hope today is that you leave this conference as a whole, but you leave my part of my speech specifically feeling like you know how to take part, feeling like if you walked up to a leftist or heard a leftist talking point, that you can start constructing those questions in your mind. I'm pretty nerdy about what I do. I over-prepare for my show. I don't read it off on the show, but I think about what the left is going to say about a certain topic before I enter into a debate, because then you're not caught off guard. And once you think about what they're going to say, you can prepare those questions ahead of time for your mental bank, for your card catalog of information. And I mean, it's what we have to do. And my hope is that after hearing this, you will feel like you're able to do that and take part in it. And it's also why this is really exciting. I'm so excited to be able to share this with you. This is also why I'm writing a book about this. This tiny little blip today is just scratches the surface of what's in my book. And my book is a handbook for us, for all of us, about how we can go out and how we can defeat the left. Not wait for somebody else to do it, but do it ourselves. I think you guys got a handout about it. I hope you'll check it out. You can pre-order it now if you want to make my day. But otherwise, it is releasing in August. So if you do get it, when you do get it, let me know what you think. Let me know if this helps you feel empowered to have these debates, and then share those debates with others, because we're going to start that revolution. We're going to take back our country for conservatives. Thank you. Do you guys want to do questions? Yes?
Hey, my name's Ellie. First of all, I just want to say you look amazing. Like you are so pretty. Anyways,
It's just a lot of makeup and hairspray.
I was gonna say your hair looks so good. Anyways,
This is like after taking a nap in the car too.
no one can tell. Trust me. I guess my question is, I tend to be a lot better at at writing than speaking, and I don't know, you speak so clearly. Do you have any tips on really getting to the point? Sometimes I struggle with that.
Writing is the key. I mean, reading and writing are the key to a concise argument. So if you ever feel that your attention span is short, if you ever feel like, and we all do, right? It's because of our phones. Put down your phone. Whenever, and this is a personal thing that I've noticed. So I have to be tied to my cell phone because of what I do for a living. I have to know exactly what everyone's saying. I have to know exactly what news is breaking. I have to read about it. So, every time that notification comes up, I pick up my phone. And if I do that too much, I notice that my attention span is shorter. And if I put my phone down and pick up a book, and sort of like, it's almost like a drug addict, actually, trying to push through withdrawal. If you read for 15 minutes, you're like, oh man, I wonder who texted me. I wonder what Twitter's saying. If you push through that, you kind of break through that wall of a short attention span and start really getting into that book. And if you start really getting into the book, it informs how you speak. Actually, it informs grammatically, it informs vocabulary, it informs the way that you logically organize your arguments. And so my best advice is to put down your phones for a little while, read a book, and then if you feel that your personal strength is writing, do exactly what I said before. Write down, the 10 issues that Democrats talk about the most. Write down, underneath those 10 issues, write down, 2 or 3, however many you want, of the most common talking points, and then write down what you believe is the heart of the matter. With abortion, I said it's when life begins. With the Green New Deal, it's does socialism actually work, and is socialism actually moral? Each issue, you can write it down, because then you just have to revert back to your writing, and you don't think about the speaking aspect of it. You think about the logic part of it. Sure? Who's next? What's your name?
Oh, I'm
Katrina.
Thank you for coming to speak to us today.
Of course.
My question is, I'm a big fan of the probing question. I use it with my teachers a lot.
Excellent.
Works really well. But the one thing
It
that
also will work with your boyfriend. I say that, well, my husband's back there, so.
But the one thing that I have discovered is that sometimes my leftist friends or my teachers, or they'll swerve, or they'll like change the subject, change the question,
Right.
answer something else, and it's like, no, that's not what I asked you.
Right.
So how would you revert that back to your original question?
Let them get all the BS out that they have. So that's actually something that I talk about in my book a little bit, about how if you're going into a debate, and I see this on TV because I do the same thing. I prepare, the talking points that I want. I know the leftist has the talking points they want. And it doesn't matter what you say to them. If they have 5 or 6 talking points prepared, they will hammer those talking points. Even if you say, how you doing today? They'll be like, here's why I hate Donald Trump. And I'm like, not what I asked, but sure. You have to let them, don't interrupt them at the beginning. Let them get all their talking points out. Let them go for a minute, especially if this is a personal conversation and you don't have a producer in your ear yelling at you, 2 minutes. If you're not on a time clock, let them get all their BS out. Afterward, they won't have one of those talking points to pivot to. I mean, it may be a little bit different for a teacher, because the teacher is in the power position in that situation. They can define the conversation. But anywhere else where it's not a power deficit in that way, let them get out all the BS and then say, okay, but what about your original question? And then where are they going to pivot to? They've already dumped all of their information bomb on you. Just let it slide by. And then you can redefine the conversation. If they repeat it, you can be like, yeah, you said that before, but what about... And keep going like that. It won't always work, but there are little conversational tactics that you can use. And the left are they've beat us rhetorically for a long time, because we tend to be, stereotypically maybe our nose in an economics book, and they're learning how to have cocktail chatter, they're learning how to do that kind of stuff, very surface level, and we're very at the very intellectual level comparatively, but that doesn't always win a debate, the intellectual level. So yeah, just bring it back to where you were originally and go from there. Sure?
We only have time for one more question.
Hi, Jamie.
Okay. So it's easier to engage with people like that and kind of a back and forth when they're actually willing to talk to you.
Yeah.
But how do you deal with people or groups on campus who, instead of engaging with you, just kind of come and, spit in front of your displays, wash away your chalk, take pictures of you and post it on their group social media and act like they are engaging, when in reality they're just ignoring the issues?
Well, 2 things. I think that's probably the situation where you can go ahead and go for that dopamine rush. Just go ahead and destroy them. You don't have to be productive. I think questions still work to a certain extent. I mean, if there's violence, don't engage that. Just film it and get out of there. But don't engage that. But if they're just being disrespectful, you can ask, do you think that spitting is respectful of other people? You can just ask questions like that to kind of bring it up. I mean, you're probably not going to have a productive conversation in that situation, but you can always invite them, especially if you are doing a video or something like that you're trying to expose them. You can say, listen, you're coming over here and you're spitting in front of our table, but we'd love to invite you for a debate. Not right now when tempers are high, but we'd love to invite you for a debate to talk about the things that are important to you. Are you interested in doing that? And if they say yes, then great, because that'll have to be a calmer debate. If they say no, then it'll be like, well, aren't you a loser? That would be my recommendation. But a lot of those campus groups, I mean, they are getting a little more agitated. And so, I mean, I don't have to tell you ladies this. Just be very cautious of those confrontations, because it's not worth even the video if they're being destructive. Those people are not going to be the ones who are defining policy and a big part of this debate 5 or 10 years from now. So unless they're actually willing to be normal people, then just ignore them and do your thing. Do we have time for any more or no? Nope, we're good. Ladies, give a big hand to the Claire Booth Luce Center for Conservative Women. And thank you so much for having me.